live, see how things are. It's a beautiful day here, and it's 6th of June, 6:45 p.m. local Mountain Daylight Time. And I'd like to say hello to everybody on this anniversary of D-Day. Of course, that was yesterday for those over in the UK and on the continent, and that was celebrated in suitable style. And we watched, they showed a lot of it on the news over here. And my father was actually in the Pacific Theater, so he didn't have anything to do with what was going on in Europe. He was part of the Battle of Leyte Gulf. He was on Tacloban. He was a PT boat commander as an enlisted man. He had a variety of jobs, of course, whatever needed to be done. He's a hero in my mind. I really appreciate him for a lot of other things that he's done too. He was a pioneer in California in the special education movement. That's what we know it today as. Back then it had a different name. The Educable Mentally Retarded, or EMR program. The idea was that kids with low IQs could still be taught. They didn't have to be warehoused. They could be taught, and they could be taught to take care of themselves, and maybe a simple occupation. I mean, anything that you might expect, but that was the idea. There was also a program put together, whereas those who were in the special education program were able to be given an individual education plan that would follow them throughout their until they were adults. And my own son, because of his issues he had when he was a kid, he had epilepsy, he had all kinds of things going on, including some personality issues. And my dad was able to talk me through all the difficulties and procedures that we had to go through. And it was extraordinarily helpful. He helped his own grandson do that. I've often mentioned to people that he practiced on his own kids, but I don't know, maybe that's true. Let's see, we've got quite a few people checking in. I want to discuss a couple things with you. I'm going to talk a little bit about D-Day. Today is D-Day in the U.S. It was yesterday on the continent. And then I want to talk a little bit about what's going on at the ARRL and the attack that they had there, which was pretty massive according to the FBI. Usually they come in and take your file system or something like that, but they took over a lot more. And they basically, somebody, just was cruelly had it in for the ARRL, trying to wipe them off the face of the earth, and they failed, and it's coming back. Okay. Terrence, 2 Echo 0, India Papa Kilo, says, greetings from London. Hello, and it's the 7th over there. He says, hi, Dave, hope all is well with you. Bill Myers says, good evening, Dave, and all Augies from northern Wisconsin. Ralph Leland says, hi, Dave, and everyone, K4TA in Fork Union, Virginia, 75 and nice. Von Ziegel said, hello, Dave and Augies, from Don N6 CD. Chris Wilson says, good morning, friends. Been a while. Well, good to have you back. Pedro Marias, I think you're just supposed to do one trill on that. I used to be able to do that very well, but with false T's, it's really hard to do. It says, looking forward to this very special D-Day evening. 73 Pedro K6MIL. Ted Bowman says, hello, Dave. Can you give a brief overview of SDR? Thanks, Ted. KK7KHK. Well, why don't I just pause right now and give you a little bit of an overview. Software-defined radio, or SDR, it means different things to different people. Basically, the fundamental idea is that having the necessary compute power can allow you to use modulation techniques and demodulation techniques that would be difficult in an analog radio. And you can go beyond what an analog radio could do for you. I'll give you two examples. Filtering is one. We all know about, filters to have a narrow pass band so we can hear just a single CW signal. And the problem with that is that the narrower an analog filter is, the more likely it is to ring. Ring means instead of dit, you get zit, it just sort of fades away. It has a tail and I don't know, I guess you'd call it a snout. Anyway, you can build digital filters that don't have any tails. You can build, every analog filter has what's called an infinite impulse response. If you hit it with a very short pulse, the output of the filter mimics the frequency response of the filter. It's a fundamental theorem in filtering. And every analog filter has an infinite input response, meaning that if you hit it with this, it'll trace out its path and then it never quite gets to zero. Now, after 5 tau, 5 time constants on the filter, it is considered to have hit zero. But you can create something called a finite impulse response filter in digital, where if you hit it with a pulse, the reaction of the filter will again trace out the band pass of the filter, and then it will come to a complete halt. It will come to a point where that previous input has no more response on it. So going to software-defined can bring you a lot of additional kinds of filters. Also, one of the things that you can do that's basically impossible to do with analog means is digital noise reduction. Noise is uncorrelated. Meaning that just because you know the past of the noise waveform, you know nothing about its future. Okay? But from a digital point of view, noise is uncorrelated. A correlation means a piece of the noise has some response prior to that it's correlated with. Noise is uncorrelated. Now, speech, however, is highly correlated. Over a 3 kilohertz bandwidth, something like that. If you're high, you're probably going to still be high as you come down, and you come down in a predictable manner. And so it is possible, and I have built filters to demonstrate this to myself, that in the presence of uncorrelated noise, what you do is you pull out the correlated part of the signal and skip the rest. And that can, when set up right, make for a phenomenally good noise filter. Now, the noise filters that are in our modern radios are good, but they're not best. The best that I've ever seen that I've personally played with are the time wave filters, the DSP 599 Plus, which is an old model, but they've got things similar too, where you can play with a number of the parameters on it. And speech sounds just like speech. I mean, it can sound very good. And the noise is just gone or greatly reduced. I run my 7300 with the noise reduction on. Not on a lot, but on enough to really cut that noise out. Okay, that's something you can do with a digital radio. Now, there's another thing you can do, and that has to do with single sideband demodulation. The normal way to demodulate a single sideband signal is with frequency-based filtering. What you do is, in the IF section usually, you'll take the passband and cut it so that, you know, either the lower or upper half is gone, filtered out, and then using a product detector you can make the carrier go away, and you're left with one half. And when you demodulate that, you end up with the voice. Okay, now what you do with that is that you completely lose the phase information, because you're doing all this in the frequency domain and you're ignoring the phase angle. Because when you do stuff in the frequency domain, you think of a chart or graph or something like that. But there's a twist around the axis that represents the phase that is utterly ignored in frequency or filter-based single sideband reception. You can reinsert the phase if you want to, but most human ears are pretty doggone near phase insensitive, because the way our ears work, the cochlea has a bunch of little hairs in it, and it's in a liquid that has a very dense fluid, so that the speed of sound through there is pretty slow, and you get, in essence, the little hairs are all the different lengths from long down to short. And what you get is, when the hair gets tickled, your brain gets an input that says you're hearing something on this frequency. Now, the fact, if there are two frequencies at the same time, different frequencies, let's suppose those are harmonics, one at 1 kilohertz, one at 2 kilohertz, okay? Now, if they are in phase, that means that initial zero crossing is the same for both. The second wave will go twice and then come back and resync with the first one. Okay, that's where you have phase coherence in the signal. Your ear is just simply not very aware of that. Trained ears can, but what can happen is if one of those signals, the phase changes so that the two never have a zero crossing in common, okay, you'll just hear in your head a 1 kilohertz and a 2 kilohertz tone. Now, trained ears can hear the difference. So there are different forms of demodulation. QRP Labs has created an analog form of a digital reception. This analog form of digital reception was first made somewhat popular by Central Electronics, a guy by the name of Wes Shum, or Shum. And he made, this was when single sideband was just coming out, he made equipment that would decode the phases, adding and subtracting in such a way that you got either the upper sideband or the lower sideband, and the other was canceled out. There are a lot of dials to tune to make this all line up. And he could produce with that some very high quality audio. Now, I'll think of his name in a minute, Jan, I think, has done at QRP Labs is that's the way his receivers are set up. There's a 90-degree phase shift. Now remember, when you're doing a 90-degree phase shift on an audio signal, every frequency in there is delayed by 90 degrees. So if it's a low frequency, it's delayed for a long time. Medium frequency, it's delayed for a medium time. Short frequency, high frequency, delayed for a very short period of time. That takes some doing to put together a linear filter that will do that. But when you do that, you can play games combining these and using this method, and the name is escaping me right now. But it will allow you to get very high quality reception. Now, the problem with Wes's approach was that it was quite a bit more expensive than the normal filter method. So Art Collins, who made very good radios, but he used a mechanical filter to filter out the sideband, get the one he wanted. Now, the problem with a mechanical filter is that the phase response on the thing is absolutely horrible. The frequency response is very nice, but the phase response is just winding around in there like crazy. So if you listen on an old Collins radio, even CW tones sound different, just different. And so anyway, the phasing method that Chuck Schumm used fell into disuse because it was so much cheaper to do it with filters. Well, now that you've got the signal in digital form, it's just a matter of programming to use the more effective digital filtering to do the phasing response on that thing, and you get a better quality signal out of there. So it's interesting because that came out as part of the early digital radios, and then QRP Labs actually converted that back to an analog way of doing that. And it takes a little setup to get everything right, but once you do, you get really, really nice stable output of the radio. Now, the key thing about software-defined radios is where in the processing line do you convert it to digital. In my first software-defined radio, which is the Ten-Tech Jupiter, the last IF frequency is 25 kilohertz. Not very much. A normal last IF is 455, but this is just 25. And the analog to digital converters at the time could convert that to digital, and the remainder of the demodulation stream was in software. It's all in software, so you could get new firmware and stuff like that. And unfortunately, at the time, you had to take out the firmware chip, put a new one in. But all that's changed now. And what they have done as this has got better is they've moved the digital processing upstream. So the way the ICOM 7300 does it, the very first amplifier in there, the RF amplifier, is analog. And all it does, it's a band pass filter. It's set up to be a band pass filter. And then it's immediately digitized before that. So let's suppose you have a signal at 14.200 to 14.203. Nothing of interest in the stuff before you get to the 2.3 is of interest to anybody. So you very simply throw away those digits, because they're all the same for that frequency. Throw them away, and that's how you do your down conversion. So you're not introducing any kind of distortion in doing a mixing to get down converted to the frequency you want. There's a name for this declination or something. Decimation, destruction, death, I don't know what it is. But they just take those first several digits, which are the same for everything, throw them away, and now you've got your demodulated signal. And then you can do all that in digital, so you don't have IFs and stuff like that. It's all digital, and you can get very good responses. Now, there are problems with this, of course. One, your audio to your analog to digital converter needs to be extremely linear, and if you saturate it because the signal's too strong, you kind of like lose everything. Okay, so you have to avoid saturating that. And then also, for a very, very weak signal, sometimes the signal is so small that that last 1 and 0 in there, you won't toggle it because the signal variation is so small. You'll lose it completely. So in modern SDRs, you have a dither feature that you can turn on. I can't remember what ICOM calls it. I'm not sure if I use it. But it's a dither, so it moves the zero factor back and forth, so the signal has a chance to register on either side. And that allows you to hear a little bit further into the noise. Now, digital filters, or digital radios can be very good with some of the weird measurements and so on, can be very, very, very linear, very good. It's all digital, so once you have the signal in digital form, you can do all kinds of things. You can apply this noise reduction like I was talking about. You can apply all kinds of filters. There are just all kinds of things that you can do with the system. So that is the SDR. Now, an SDR transmitter does the same thing in reverse. It uses those two systems there to create a single sideband suppressed carrier, or actually zero carrier, output wave, which is then up converted to the correct frequency. And you, by putting those digits back in front. And you can see that when you switch bands, all you're doing is switching the digits you're putting in front of the signal. And then you have your single sideband signal at the right frequency, and at that point you've got to have an output amplifier, which is, it could be linear, which they often are. I think the ICOMs is, or you can actually go for these fun Class E kinds of things where the transmitter output is either on or off, and you play the games with the width of the pulses to create a somewhat rectangularized output. Now, the way square waves work, square waves have only odd harmonics. So you just put a filter in there. It doesn't have to be a really good one, because if you're transmitting, say, on 10 megahertz, your first meaningful harmonic is up at 30 megahertz. Well, it's real easy to plop a filter over that to keep only the 10 going out, and that takes care of all the digital noise. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing what you can do with these things. There end up, you have to have some audio parts. I mean, the human ear is analog, so at some point it's got to be converted to analog. Okay, so there's your brief overview of SDR for Ted Bowman. I hope that makes some sense. There are books out about it. You're probably used to hearing the term Fourier transform, where a Fourier transform will take an analog time-based waveform and convert it into and find the frequencies in it, which can be plotted on a waterfall or something. The Fourier transform, as it turns out, also will give you the phase. But most people don't pay any attention to that part because of this. If you're going to do very careful wave-based system, you may have to take into account the phase. Phase shift keying is done slowly enough and in an analog fashion so that you don't have to worry about that too much. It'll go through just fine. Okay, so there you go, is your software-defined radio. All radios today say that they're software-defined. All of them will do a Fourier transform on the entire band so that you can look at the entire band on a spectrum scope, which is much better than the truly atrocious spectrum scope that Ten-Tech Jupiter has. It was so bad that it was useless. And on the ICOM, they showed all the time. And I use it to find signals all the time. So anyway, there we go. Okay, so Glenn Martin is saying hello from far west Missouri area. We were through there, of course, when we went to Dayton. Went right by there. Almost 12 months, and he's been on the stream. Well, Chris, welcome back. Optical Man Jeff. KE0OG. Hello, Dave and all loggies from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We're at 77 and very windy. When we went to Dayton, we had a lot of wind. On the way back, it seemed to stop and go away, and we didn't encounter it again. Mr. G, greetings from KD9FCZ. Mark French says hello. Chris Wilson, they were called trainables. Low IQ education was more lower level training, made them useful. Yeah, and there was something that McNamara, when he was Secretary of Defense, wanted to bring in people with low IQs to do scuzz jobs on the battlefield, and it did not work out because these people were not trainable as regards to their own safety. They ended up being a hazard not only to themselves but to others around them. So they had to stop that very quickly. Yeah, there was a TMR, the trainable mentally retarded, but they finally settled on special education with this idea that people who had education problems were special. There's a real problem with considering someone special. There's mental disorders that have to do with narcissism, where a person thinks they're special, meaning they're different and somehow more important than other people. And you can get into all kinds of trouble, but it's still called special education. And it has, you know, I look at the work my dad did and how many millions of kids across the nation his work has impacted. That's one of the reasons I'm very proud of my father. He is the one who got me interested as a child in electronics. And he claims, I don't remember this, he claims that one time I stuck a screwdriver into an outlet, and he said the look on my face was priceless. He says that was the beginning of my love affair with all things electric and electronic. I don't remember that particular incident. I was just a kid at the time. Okay, let's see. Good evening all from Chip, WI8M. Leo says, good afternoon from Leo Gustafson. KK7CLY checking in from Albany, Oregon. 79 and 80% humidity. I discovered that the hub of my hex beam is a standard ½ inch. Okay. Mike Saucerhead, good evening from KG4ENZ in Virginia. Leo says, I think I'm going to pick up some Schedule 80 PVC as surrogate stretchers. That'd probably work. Richard Myers, hello from South Daytona, Florida. Had to QRT from the thunderstorms. Everything disconnected. Good idea. That area of the world is the thunderstorm capital of the world. From KO4OSA. Sean, KM6NFO, has added $10 to the chat revenue. Thank you. The heat has come to Sacramento. 104 yesterday. 100 now. What's word on ARRL? Well, we might as well just get right to that, okay? There is let me go to the screen. Okay, there we go. Okay, we got audio. All right. Doug Dry called and said, no audio. Well, I won't read the whole thing to you again, but just wanted you to know, and I don't know if there's a way to make this smaller. There we go. Now we got the whole thing. I'll let you read this as we go down it. There's been a serious incident. It started on May 12th, just on the eve of Dayton. There's been certain amounts of information given out. Says some systems are working fine, including renewal. He says, we understand the frustration and inconvenience this incident has caused. For me, terrible. And we sincerely appreciate your patience and understanding as our dedicated staff and partners continue to work tirelessly to restore affected systems and services. I have a feeling there are a few people at the ARRL who have not slept since this thing started. Okay, so what's going on with the ARRL? I'm thinking that it is a ransomware attack. This, let's see, let's go to normal view here. I'm thinking this is a ransomware attack. I received a couple files in my Dropbox that purported to be from somebody I knew at the League, and they were files that are of the kind that would be sent to me. And I couldn't open them, but there was a text file with it with instructions for opening. And the instructions for opening were to go to pay a ransom at a certain website. So immediately, of course, I got rid of that stuff out of my Dropbox. Didn't want that in there. So that is why I am conjecturing that it was a ransomware attack. Now, these sophisticated state actors, and I'm talking about people like the Soviets, North Koreans, not Soviets, Russians, North Koreans. The Ukrainians used to be pretty good at this. There were other Eastern European, Bulgaria, that do these sort of things there. And the reason their government doesn't stop them is because they're very lucrative and they're bringing money into the country. So they're just turning a blind eye to it. Now, they've hit hospitals. Hospitals, if they have to pay money for something like this, that gets passed directly to the patients. And in a membership organization like ARRL, again, same kind of thing. If they have to fork over $100,000 or $200,000 to get the keys to turn this off, it really impacts the organization's ability to do business. Now, and personally, I don't feel I should support a .org type organization to pay ransomware and stuff like that. What I'd really like them to do is use their backups and restore this stuff properly. It is possible to mess up a server so badly that you can't reuse it. You end up having to chuck it because they get in not only to the firmware, but they get into the microcode on the chips, the processor chips. A lot of people don't know this, but those chips are microcoded, and the microcoding can be changed on those things. And once you change it, if you can't change it back, if you can't reflash it, and you've got to change the processor and you got to change all this, chuck it and start over again. So that's why I think it's a ransomware attack. The problem with ransomware attacks is, one, you pay the money, you have no guarantee that they will give you the code that will release your data. Two, you have no guarantee that they won't come back in and do it again, because they can leave code behind on your servers that will listen, and they can contact them and reinstantiate the software, the ransomware software. So the ARRL is doing what they should, which is to recover all these systems. Shoot, even their phone system was down. Now, phone system these days are just a computer server with IP. They use the same IP they use for their regular IP in their office. They have IP telephones, and they use those like normal telephones. That's been true for 20 or 30 years. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on with the ARRL. When will it be fixed? It's gonna take a while. The July issue of QST is supposed to be out on time online, but not necessarily the print edition. Now, I had to submit my August column, and I had the whole mail system was down. So I finally sent it to the sister of one of the editors so that they could get the files. And they had contacted me to say this was a way I could get the files to them. I have not heard from them. So I am not certain they got it, but I'm thinking they must have. Okay. And if they don't, I can get them to them in a heartbeat. Is still up. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. The learning portal is still down. And for some reason I'm not getting, there we go. Got something out there, okay. The learning portal is down. That's where I put my videos. I'm in the process of updating all the videos for the Amateur Extra. I just got one done today. Had to re-record a few things because they were in reference to the wrong stuff. I got that one done. I'm going to be working with my assistant to get the rest of those done so we can get them up. But there's no place to put them up right at the moment. Also, that has to do with the accompanying videos for all of my columns. I'm 3 behind now. I need to get those up because I need to get paid. I went into overdraft a little bit this morning. Okay, Sean, this was your 10th super on a live stream. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It says number 10 up there. Mark French visited Normandy in 1977. It was a different world back then. I went through that area on a tourist bus, and they didn't stop. And I've never quite forgiven that company for not at least stopping at the memorials and monuments that we had there. I mean, even just a 2 or 3 hour stop would have been incredible. A lot of people gave their lives on behalf of the Western democracies, and it was even at the time Italy's what was his name? Benito Mussolini was a dictator and made no bones about it. And there were a lot of people who said a dictatorship is a better government than a democratic government because a democratic government could never get anything done. Whereas the dictatorship could do it quite quickly. So initially, Hitler and Mussolini were admired from abroad. And, you know, yes, they were doing things that were anti-Jewish, but I got to tell you about that time. A lot of people were anti-Jewish all over the world. I mean, it was like the colored issue with the Negroes. They finally in the 60s and 70s started calling themselves blacks just to get away from the prejudice. And I remember that time. I lived through that. I was in the Air Force in 77. I'd just gotten in the Air Force. But anyway, that would have been quite a powerful thing because there's huge areas there set aside in remembrance, and there's memorials at all the major beaches where those landings were made. And it was Eisenhower's idea, but it took thousands upon thousands of people to do the planning for it. And if you've looked at how big the landing was, it was the biggest amphibious operation in world history. And it was just amazing. Okay, let's see. T. Paven, 73 from Thomas, KN6, WildD, great to see you. Von Ziegel added $10 to the chat revenue and says thanks. Thomas Weigel says, Weigel. I'm going to go with Weigel. Sounds good. Greetings from Minneapolis. Tom AB0J, all the best. Chris Wilson, post rainy and sunny and 16 degrees C. Oh boy. In Sydney, Australia. Lance, Dave, thank you for your service. Thank you. No idea how 10 meters is doing. Leo, I would like to visit Tarawa to see where my uncle and namesake got his silver star. Mike says 10 is dead. Chuck Schreiber, good evening, Dave, and all Augies, N5 KVO from the hill country of South Texas, currently 90. It is 85 here with 19, that's 19% humidity. Kevin Lehigh, hello, Dave. From Kevin in Gilbert, Arizona, in the Phoenix area, KZ6C. RS, howdy, Dave, from Camarillo, California, nice area. Rick, KN6 UTF. Eric Sund, N0EZX, hello, Dave, and all. I'm just visiting Vancouver, Washington, where it's 78 and sunny. Just received my ARRL email about the web attack they've endured. Yeah, it was shattering to the organization. And I imagine it's all hands on deck there to get that thing recovered. My hope is that they had the good sense to keep backups. And backups of backups. If you run a tape every day to back up the whole site, don't rerun it on the same tape the next day. Keep that tape for a month, so you get like a month of backups or something. Said, I got my first contact with a German person operating in Bavaria, Deutschland, last night on 20 meters. Amazing. Yeah, it's fun to work with DX like that. I've been using the X-Phase QRM eliminator kit to pull the hash and city noise down 3 S points versus the signal I want on 20 meters. Good deal. Robert Edwards, hi Dave. Why are some old timers are saying online that the ARRL has management problems at the top, inspiring these oldsters to give up membership? Is there anything to this criticism? Okay, understand that the ARRL is the only American organization that does what it does. I mean, there's 2 in Canada. In the UK, it's the Radio Society of Great Britain. So the League has kind of a monopoly in what it's doing. It used to be that there were other magazines like 73 and Ham Radio and stuff like that that would have their own position on kind of issues that the League would undertake. These other magazines tended to be strictly publishing houses. They would publish the magazine, books, things like that. The league publishes magazines, books, now getting into kits. But the thing is, only the league has the ins with the FCC to have some influence there and do the stuff that Riley Hollingsworth is in charge of. A lot of other things like that. It has been fashionable over the years to dump hate on the ARRL. Now, let me tell you the mistake that the league made back in the 70s. Might even have been the late 60s. I think it was the 70s. Nearly every ham was general class or novice. And the idea was that the novice had a year, then 2 years, to upgrade to general. Once you had upgraded to general, you had all amateur privileges. It was literally the general class license that everybody did. There were 2 additional classes of license, advanced and extra. All they did was give bragging rights. You could say, I'm an extra, or I'm advanced, or something like that. You passed the test, was a written test. The amateur extra, you had to go to 20 words a minute. Whereas the advanced was just a written test. Now, the league made a serious mistake. What they did was they proposed what they called incentive licensing. They were going to take half of the operating frequencies away from the generals and give a large chunk of the remainder to the advanced and the really juicy frequencies to the extras. So the generals, with the stroke of the pen, when this thing passed, the FCC went along with this. Generals lost half their band privileges, just poof, overnight. And most of those old folks were used to having all of the privileges, did not like having privileges taken away, and were furious at the league because they were the people behind it. So this is in, let's say, 1970, 73, let's just say 74, okay, which is 50 years ago this year, 50 years ago. Many people who were generals, you got to understand the amateur population back then was much younger than it is today. So you have a lot of people who still remember losing their frequency privileges to incentive licensing. And incentive licensing is a 4-letter word to a lot of these old hams. And so they have just for the last 50 years badmouthed the ARRL, never bothered to update to advanced or extra. Well, extra's a little hard, but advanced a little hard too. You can't do advanced anymore. It used to be that the advanced class license was the hard one, and then for the extra was all the stuff having to do with incentive licensing, becoming volunteer examiners, and so on. I took the advanced class license in, it was after my mission, so it had been, and before I went in the Air Force, so around 1975. And I stayed advanced class for close to 20 years. And then I was working with this group of youth that was under the aegis of the Boulder Amateur Radio Club. They called them BARC Juniors. And I worked with them for 10 years. And I was helping these kids get their code speed up And there was this one kid in particular. He was one smart dude. He was one of like 8 people in the whole country who aced the ACT exam. Every question right. Really smart guy. Anyway, he was going to beat me to 20. And I says, I'm not letting a teenager beat me to extra. So I put in the work and got my extra. But so that it is a long answer to your question, that these people have extraordinarily long memories, and by venting their spleen on the ARRL, they've really gotten their spleens into good shape so that they can vent lots of spleen on the ARRL, and they still do. So you can't argue with them. I mean, their basic premise that the league took away half their amateur privileges is in fact true, even though that's 50 years ago. And the league has said mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa, thousands upon thousands of times. And people won't forgive them. So there it is. There it is. The league does a heck of a lot of good. The league, after all, I'm slightly biased here. I mean, I write the Ask Dave column for QST. Also, the league has adopted my training videos as theirs. They pay me to lease them, okay? And it's a nice chunk of my retirement income. So I'm very prejudiced on behalf of the league. On the other hand, I believe in transparency. And let me give you an example. For those of you who can remember President Ronald Reagan. When that idiot tried to shoot him, and did shoot him, Reagan went to the hospital, and the hospital and Reagan decided on full transparency. So we were treated every day, several times a day, to news conferences where they would show the x-rays, they would show the lab reports, they would discuss what they were going to do and what they weren't going to do, and this fragment of the bullet went here and this fragment of the bullet went there. It was complete transparency. And of course, the American people just lapped it up. They loved it. And as a result, President Reagan's popularity went way up for his willingness to do this, willingness to share. As soon as he got out of the hospital and back in the saddle in the White House, he said, "And that is now the last I will ever say on this incident." And he never did address it again. So it was interesting. His transparency was totally and thoroughly complete. Now, you look at what's happening in England right now. The king has cancer. The Kate Middleton maybe has cancer. And they're talking about William and Kate having trouble in their marriage. And the reason all of these scurrilous rumors are running around is because they are not being transparent. They're not being transparent. They would be much better off if they said the kind of cancer that Prince Charles has is X. And here's an x-ray. And this is what we did. This is what we're going to do in the future. And we'll keep you informed. And the same with Kate Middleton. You wouldn't have all this mess. But these people want to just give out a little bit of information. And what that does, it's like when you're flying and you're at a stopover and the flight is delayed and they won't tell you why or for how long. They keep you in the dark, and feed you lies. Okay. And you get really mad at the airline, and no wonder. I remember one flight I was on. It was United out of Denver. They had a problem with an engine, and you could all look at the window out at the engine. And one of the flight attendants, who was male, came out and got on the horn and says, okay, this is exactly what is wrong. We're having a problem with this sensor on this engine. Right now we are checking over in spares to see if we have one. And a few minutes later, okay, we found one. They're coming over to check it, and you can watch out the window and watch them do it. And he did. He gave us this running indication of what was going on. And they ended up having to change the engine. And it was very much appreciated. This is called full transparency, and it was very much appreciated. And we need that. You know, I don't like it when the press or somebody has to drag the truth out of an organization. And so I think the ARRL could be more transparent. They could say what systems are down, what they're doing about it, who's in charge, what kind of lessons they've learned, whatever like that could certainly all be given out, I think. Okay, so there we go. Is there anything to this criticism? Yeah, sure. I mean, do you like paying taxes to the IRS? Is the IRS one of your favorite organizations? Do you just go out there and send them love? Of course not. I mean, this is part of life, that there's always an interface with whoever you're dealing with that rubs you the wrong way. And that's what's happened with the League. In my humble opinion, every ham should consider it mandatory to join the ARRL. Now, does that mean like the ARRL? Not necessarily. Does that mean to never send them an email saying, I wish you'd do this differently? No, of course not. Absolutely do that. But you should be a member of the League, because the League is extremely powerful with government over what we get, what happens, all of these things like that. They are much more than a publishing organization. They do have a field organization, and your club is very likely affiliated with them, and they are very good at setting the agenda. They have made a solemn promise that they will never, ever again take away any frequencies from any ham. So yes, please join the League. Please support the League. You don't have to say something like, I just got a traffic ticket, and so therefore I love the highway patrol. Usually, I'm not sure I've ever met a person who agrees that they should have been given a ticket. Everybody thinks it was wrong. But do we need the highway patrol? Absolutely, we do. I remember the time I had a motorcycle accident. I was rammed from the rear. I went 125 feet without benefit of the motorcycle and ended up tangled up in a barbed wire fence. Fortunately, I had full leathers on, helmet, and boots, and all that kind of thing like that. But I did receive a terrible shoulder injury. Nothing broken, but just messed up. The highway patrolman came to visit me in the ER, and he said, he says, were you drinking? And this caught me a little bit off guard, because I'd had breakfast, and I don't imbibe in alcohol, so drinking doesn't mean the same thing to me as it might mean to somebody else. I said, yeah, I had some orange juice this morning, but in any event, I said, no, I have not been drinking. And he says, I didn't think so. He says, they were trying to make it out that you did this, this, and this. And I'll tell you what, I didn't believe him. So I wrote them a ticket for reckless driving resulting in injury. And I said, well, thank you very much. And on his way out, he says, I ride a motorcycle too. So, oh boy, I sure loved the highway patrol that day. Okay, we are dropping out intermittently, and I apologize for that. I am using Starlink. Okay, hello from New York. Leo, is your station on the east? No, somebody is dealing with a hex beam. Boy, you got to have a pretty big hex beam. Oh, when my hex beam was working in the 7300, couldn't make the leap over the pond. It is difficult to work UK stations for some reason. It's real easy for me to get Spain. I don't know why, but it is. Ted Bowman says, thanks. Robert Varner, hello from stormy New Jersey. And Normie says, deja vu. RS, Dave, do you miss your airplane? Yes. There are people who say, and they say this about RVs, boats, everything. The happiest days are when you buy it and when you sell it. Well, I had a very happy day when I bought it and a very sad day when I sold it. And I'm going through airplane withdrawal right now. I really would rather be flying. Life and death as special education used to mean a harder curriculum to challenge the faster learners in school. Amazing how they totally reversed that. Let's see, what do they call the gifted? GAT, gifted and talented programs, is what I've always heard them called. The GAT programs. I was put into an accelerated math program because my 6th grade teacher thought I was good in math. So that meant I took 7th and 8th grade algebra in 7th grade. Then in the 8th grade took geometry. And, you know, it just worked its way up to where in the 11th grade, I had to go to another high school to take the class that I was going to take in advanced math, which had to do with matrix algebra and integral equations. And then I majored in math. I got a degree in math. And then I went back to school and got another degree in electrical engineering. So that 6th grade teacher put me into that accelerated program. So yeah, names are weird. Tim Backus, hi everyone. Tim, WB7ORB in Tucson, 113 degrees today. Woo! Doug Dry, good evening, Dave and Augies from Doug, KD4NC in Kennesaw, Georgia. Oops, Augies, yeah. I lost audio somewhere in there when I started to read that letter from the league. Doug Dry was kind enough to call me on the phone he gave me, which you probably didn't hear because the sound went away. But he called me and told me no audio, so I switched it on, and I don't know why. This should not change. The settings should not change when I turn the program off. My 11-year-old son and I plan to study for our technician. Very good. I've watched and really enjoyed the videos you made to go with the handbook. Well, very good, Priscilla, and I hope that you and your 11-year-old go to test the same day and come back and do that. Okay, I'm going to go back down to where we passed the no audio things. And I'm not going to do the online. I'm going to quit at 8 here tonight. Sorry, just trying to get on in sync. Too much going on. I'm of an age where it takes a while, sometimes all the morning, for me to get to the point where I really feel like I can accomplish something. And so a lot of stuff that I would normally be doing in the mornings just doesn't get done. So that's why I'm so grateful to have an assistant who will be back tomorrow. We will be working on the amateur extra videos and getting that 30-foot pole back in the air. And I'm having another 30-foot push-up pole coming from somebody tomorrow. So we can put two 30-foot poles up and get antennas up high. You know, that's the right height for a 20-meter dipole, and we can play some games with that. Okay, I was at Normandy for the 75th, and I met 8 vets who were in Omaha that bloody morning. I cried. If anyone has the time and means to visit that sacred place, go. Yes, I agree. My dad was in the Pacific Theater, so he had different events over there. Someday I'd like to visit the Battleship Arizona. And now all those islands that the U.S. had over there, where they put runways on them to use as bombing bases for the island hopping campaign, the U.S. is quietly but hurriedly going over there, spiffying up those concrete slabs, turning them back into airfields. And you can guess why. So let's see. I found it was much easier than I thought in taking the exam for my ticket. Makes me wish I'd gone for the general. At the same time, I got it later, however, and found much of the details crossed over. Yes, they did. Okay, comment on the ARRL. Whoops, things just... by the way, feel free to do super chats. Happy to see them. Comment on ARRL and suddenly audio goes away. Yeah. Will drum for food. Yes, Leo was right. The tech is easier than you think, and it will be, and practice makes it a snap. Okay, I think we've got the sound fixed at this point. Leo, it's been a while since I took any kind of test, so I bought the Q&A guide too. We found a Zenith transatlantic in my parents' basement, and I'm so intrigued to see if it will still work. Priscilla, if you have not turned that radio on yet, don't. That radio is of an age where the components that are in there have degraded with time. And you need to get an expert from a local ham radio club to walk you through the process of what to do with that. What they do with those old radios is they bring them up very slowly in voltage, very slowly, over a period of hours, to see if the electrolytic capacitors will reform. If you bring it up, all of a sudden you'll blow them all. And the problem is you could very well, as a result, blow the power transformer. And the power transformer on those things is all but impossible to replace. So that's why you bring it up slowly. So yeah, my folks had a transoceanic B600 when I was a kid. I have a transoceanic in the basement too that I haven't tried to restore yet. Even from Oregon, we could receive programs out of Holland on that thing. It's locking up, as you mentioned, the country names, yeah. We'll drum for food. Yes, that's why we have back sites and off-site backups. And you need, now these guys are really sophisticated because they'll plant a little program in there that you go ahead and restore it. And it will very quickly degrade that and then go after that backup tape. So you have to be very careful. Okay, I'm running out of time here. Okay, ICOM 7300 end fed, 12 to 45, 66 feet long. Wow, that's great. There are so many wonderful people who've commented here. Hi, Dave. I had the same done by my 6th grade teacher as well. I studied computer science instead of math. My daughter got her degree in computer science. she was charging along so fast, and there's so much coursework in there. I told her, as she was going to start the semester that would end with her graduating, I said, no. I says, take fewer classes. Take some classes you enjoy. I'll pay for the extra semester. But you've got to slow down. Otherwise, you're going to burn yourself to a crisp. And bless her soul, she did what I asked her to do. And she's making more money than I ever made. So, of course, there was a little bit of inflation in the way. Optical Man Jeff says, thanks, Dave, for all your wisdom and kindness to all of us hams. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate that. I've got to go. Maybe next week we'll see if we can't get back on the air here, and because that's kind of fun. And I've got to train my assistants on how to read my logs so that I can get them to send out the QSL cards, because I'm not getting it done. Like I said, there are a lot of things I'm not getting done, but that's why I have an assistant who can do that. And I pay him good money for a teenager. I don't want him going to working for McDonald's after I've spent a lot of time training him or her. I've had female assistants too. Glenn says, thank you for all you do for the amateur radio community. Well, thank you all very, very much. Bill Myers just added $5. Says, thanks, Dave. And we will see you next week. So I'm going to say, at this point, 73.